Coming up, it's time to move on from Brexit. You lost, get over it, Project Fear. Every passing month sees these clichés become more and more pathetic and desperate. And last month saw new daily horrors afflicting British businesses and citizens as a result of the national xenophobic tantrum of 2016. Stay tuned. If you enjoy watching the Truth to Power channel, I'd really appreciate it if you'd help me out by hitting the like button and especially by sharing a link to this video on your social media platforms. When the good people at BrexitDB.com can list 42 new Brexit horror stories for the month of November 2022 alone, it's clear that the whole country has been unable to move on from Brexit and that Project Fear still reinvents itself as Project Reality on a daily basis. Hold on to your hat, as in this video I try to summarise as many of these stories as I can. 1st of November, the Herald newspaper in Scotland reports that exports to the EU from Scotland have slumped by over £2.2 billion since Brexit. That represents a 13% crash in the last 2 years. The Herald quote Dr. Liz Cameron, chief executive of the Scottish Chambers of Commerce, saying, "Scottish exporters are telling us that they continue to face growing challenges trading with countries in the EU post-Brexit. New customs procedures, tariffs, regulatory barriers and transport disruption are consistently cited as the top challenges facing firms." And for good measure, a quote from a Scottish Government spokesman as saying, "Scottish Government analysis showed that Scotland's trade in goods with the EU was 12% lower in 2021 because of Brexit. The Scottish Government is committed to Scotland rejoining the EU as an independent country." Also on the 1st of November, Indie100.com reports on the British startup company British Volt, who told the Daily Express back in June that Brexit for us has allowed us to be the one in the UK rather than being one of many in Europe. Now they're begging for a £30 million advance from the government to avoid collapse, and it's been rejected. Another Brexit benefit that's turned out to be just another unicorn crapping out rainbows. And staying on the 1st of November still, the Eater London website reports an interview with Jason Atherton, patron of the Michelin-starred Pollen Street Social in Mayfair and a group of other restaurants. Atherton said that January is crunch time and that he'll be closing restaurants then as a direct result of policy decisions from the Conservative government in the aftermath of Brexit and Britain's exit from the European Union and single market. Because of recruitment difficulties, he's unable to open some of his restaurants for breakfast and lunch already, and has blamed the government for allowing Brexit to hobble hospitality, adding, "There is a really simple step that would help, and that is to rejoin the single market. We have no choice. Everyone knows the decision we took 6 years ago was the wrong decision. They sold us a lie." The bad news, of course, for Mr. Atherton is that such a decision is now out of the UK's hands due to the xenophobic national tantrum of 2016. And here's the fourth Brexit bad news story, and we're still only on the 1st of November. The national newspaper in Scotland report that confidence in UK science is ebbing away after Brexit, with UK scientists being told they can no longer take part in meetings organised by a key European infectious diseases agency due to Brexit tensions. Do you remember when Leave.eu branded the issues highlighted by the Remain campaign over Northern Ireland as Project Fear? Right, eventually, on to the 2nd of November. Farming.com report that a new UK rule for meat exports to the EU means that UK meat production may become non-compliant. The National Sheep Association, the NSA, said that once again the industry was having to fight hard to avoid yet another Brexit barrier. With 96% of all sheep meat exports going to the EU, this could be the death knell for the industry. Still staying on only the 2nd of November, and this time a story from Bloomberg, who report on an error in the UK's post-Brexit IT border system, which disrupted companies bringing goods in from the European Union, raising costs, adding bureaucracy and snarling up deliveries. Bloomberg, a channel hardly known for being lefty Ramonas, commented, The episode highlights the reality of post-Brexit EU trade for British firms, which were promised frictionless commerce by former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but instead have been hit by extra paperwork and delays since the end of 2020. Also on the 2nd of November, and echoing the story from the previous day regarding restaurants closing because of Brexit-induced recruitment problems, chef Tom Kerridge was interviewed by Robert Peston, telling him that a huge staffing shortage in the hospitality industry is forcing businesses to close 2 or 3 days a week due to a lack of workers. During the interview, Kerridge commented that Brexit, for our industry, there's not a single positive about it. According to the London Economic, a large proportion of Britain's pubs, restaurants and hotels could go bust by the end of the year as the costs of running their business becomes impossible. 3rd of November. Still on post-Brexit recruitment, this time a shortage of health workers in Scotland, with the Daily Record reporting that Deputy First Minister John Swinney has blamed Brexit for causing a recruitment crisis in Scotland, which is impacting every sector of the Scottish economy. In a separate article this very same day, the Daily Record also reports on HMRC figures, showing that exports from Scotland to the EU have dropped 13% in the past 2 years, with Rutherglen MSP Claire Hoy quoted as saying, "Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster for every area of Scotland." And yet more Brexit bad news on this same day, 3rd of November, as Now Then magazine in Sheffield reports that the number of UK bands and artists scheduled to appear on this year's European festival circuit had fallen by a staggering 45% compared to pre-Brexit levels because of Brexit-related travel and working restrictions. And the 3rd of November was turning out to be a pretty terrible day for Brexitists, with the Plymouth Herald carrying a story about Brittany ferries suffering a 35% drop in passenger numbers and 27% drop in freight on its routes to and from France. Brexit controls are playing a part in this trend, the company said. And the Jersey Evening Post the same day reported that visitor numbers to Jersey have dropped off a cliff edge since Brexit. Apparently, the reintroduction of passport requirements after the UK's withdrawal from the EU is a big issue for the island, as only about 50% of French nationals actually have passports. The day trip market in Jersey has taken a significant hit as a result. 5th of November, City AM reports a slump in the City of London's share of foreign exchange trading, falling 5% to a 38% share of the global market since Brexit. The drop-off comes as the city still continues to operate without an equivalence permit with the EU on financial services, which would allow UK and EU investors to continue trading easily post-Brexit. The sunlit uplands have turned out to actually be a Brexit quagmire. 7th of November, Euronews report that Leo Doherty, the UK's Minister for Europe, has thrown a wobbly, accusing the EU of excluding the UK from participation in the Horizon Europe science funding programme. It seems, like many Brexitists, Mr Doherty couldn't be asked to read the finer details of Boris Johnson's Brexit withdrawal agreement and failed to understand or heed the warnings of the experts. Meanwhile, British science's reputation of being world-leading is left in tatters after the Brexitist illiterati have burned down the metaphorical library. 8th of November. A video is released by the all-party parliamentary group on fisheries, with 7 of its members saying categorically that the fishing industry has been let down by Brexit. Here's a brief glimpse of that video.
The first obvious point would be finding a way of exporting to our nearest neighbours in the EU with far greater flexibility, less bureaucracy and less cost.
11th of November. Euronews again, reporting that UK farmers are struggling to cope after Brexit. They report Liz Webster of Save British Farming, saying that the post-Brexit situation is disastrous and spiralling out of control, as a growing number of British farmers are now calling for the UK to re-enter the single market. But as regular viewers of this channel will know, that decision is, unfortunately, no longer in the hands of the UK. 15th of November. Simon Spurrell, better known by Boris Johnson's nickname for him as that bloody cheeseman, has been forced to sell his British cheese business after Brexit bureaucracy caused an annual £600,000 black hole in his business. Reported in the London Economic, he said, "The sad thing is that small businesses like ours cannot have access to the EU. I still feel very let down and bitterly disappointed by the fact I've had so many conversations with the Department for International Trade and government ministers, and nothing happens. They are so anti-Europe, they won't even discuss getting a better deal sorted out. Getting access to the single market has to be the first step." Also on the 15th of November, Grampian Online carried a story reporting on new data showing that households in Aberdeen are on average £1,069 a year worse off due to Brexit. They report Karen Adam, the SNP member of the Scottish Parliament, saying there is no evidence of the promised Brexit dividend to businesses right across Scotland. In a separate article this very same day, Grampian Online also reports local MP Richard Thompson as saying, "Brexit Britain sees farmers facing the worst conditions in living memory." This follows a report from the all-party parliamentary group on farming, which found unwelcome detrimental impacts on livelihoods as a result of Brexit. Richard Thompson added, "It's clear that Brexit doesn't work. It has been a catastrophic failure, hammering households and businesses across these islands. Scotland knew of the dangers and rightly voted against Brexit." 16th of November, and the newly converted Remainers at Bloomberg run a story about British businesses still suffering from lower sales and red tape 2 years after Britain quit the European Union. It references Fortnum and Masons, the tea people and other businesses who have completely stopped bothering even trying to export their goods to Europe. Siobhan Haviland, Director General at the British Chambers of Commerce, said, "We thought by now things would be getting better. The vast majority of businesses, 80% of those registered with the British Chambers of Commerce, have had difficulties exporting since Brexit," according to Haviland. 17th of November, Euronews carried an article which I've previously quoted in last week's video, with John Springford of the Centre for European Reform calculating that around half of the fiscal hole and the political instability that comes with that is down to Brexit. Research by Ian Mulhern of the Institute for Global Change showed that overall, the net cost of Boris Johnson's Brexit to the public finances will come in at almost £30 billion each year. He then analysed the new taxes brought in by the then Chancellor Rishi Sunak earlier this year and showed that none of these taxes would have been necessary if we'd remained in the EU. 18th of November, a caller to Nick Ferrari's show on LBC Radio explained how Brexit has massively increased the amount of paperwork for UK-EU exports, slowing the whole process down. Business consultant Elliot in Greenwich told Nick, "I'm a business consultant. I work with companies in London to look at trade links since Brexit. Unfortunately, it's a horror show. It used to be that I could get the products made and transferred within a week. I'm lucky if they're now within 6 months." Nick Ferrari asked, "Do you see any glimmers of hope?" "To be honest, Nick, I don't," came the business consultant's reply. 19th of November, the I newspaper reports on a long-running saga that Truth to Power highlighted back in early 2022. Thousands of so-called British expats in Spain are unable to obtain new driving licences to replace their UK licences which were made invalid by Brexit. Let's have sympathy for those of them that either weren't allowed a vote in the advisory referendum and those that voted to remain. The Brexitist immigrants from the UK to Spain are doubtless blaming it all on the EU. 20th of November, and ITV cover the famous Walcott Street antique and flea market in Bath, which I know well. The manager there is complaining that Brexit red tape is making it too tough to import goods from Europe. Many of the market traders who used to bring in their wares from the EU are about to call it a day, and the future of that market is under threat. 21st of November, the London Economic and many other news sources report the closure of the former five-star fish facility in Grimsby, in a major blow to the 70% Brexit voting town. Since 2020, it has made a staggering £8 million loss, with the bosses, Icelandic Seafood International, blaming it squarely on Brexit. The company is completely pulling out of the UK to focus on its European operations. This was on the same day as the boss of Britain's biggest airport group, Charlie Cornish, said there is no doubt that Brexit has damaged the UK economy, adding that it has massively exacerbated worker shortages. Cornish is reported by The Guardian as saying that 99% of leading economists would tell you that. Willie Walsh, the head of global airlines body IATA and a former boss of British Airways, shares Cornish's opinions on Brexit, saying, "It's damaged the UK from everything I've seen. I haven't heard any politician articulate any benefit and don't see any Brexit benefit for aviation." 24th of November. Back to our Scottish friends at the Herald, who report the findings of an S&P Global survey showing that UK companies have seen their new orders decline at the fastest pace for nearly 2 years, with manufacturing recording the steepest fall in export sales since May 2020, as firms experienced Brexit-related constraints. Chief economist at S&P, Chris Williamson, identified steepening export losses linked to Brexit as one of the factors contributing to the gloomiest business mood seen over the past quarter century. 25th of November. The London Economic again, this time reporting on research carried out by Aston University, which has found that Brexit has resulted in a 22.9% slump in UK exports to the European Union and a 42% reduction in the variety of products being exported. Professor John Dew of Aston University. What we are seeing is the effect of Brexit on exports. And that is persisting. It's not diminishing, and exports have yet to show any signs of recovering. Until this serious problem with exports is openly acknowledged and discussed, we won't see any necessary actions being taken. 29th of November. The Independent reckons that entry into the EU is about to get even tougher for UK passport holders. The EU has warned that new fingerprint and face checks on arrival could take up to 4 times longer than the present system. The tougher border checks are due to come into effect in May 2023, just ahead of the peak summer season. The UK helped develop the new system while part of the European Union, and then, as part of the Brexit withdrawal treaty, became subject to it. But don't forget, each Brexitist knew exactly what they were voting for. And finally, The Independent ran this article confirming that more than 40% of British exports have disappeared from European shelves since Brexit. The Federation of Small Businesses said that last year 7 in 10 firms exporting to Europe have encountered problems, and that almost 1 in 4 had suspended exports altogether. This is all due to the Brexit agreement that Boris Johnson's government cobbled together, and which is continuing to damage the UK as a trading nation now and in the very long term too.
No, everything will be confiscated. Welcome to the Brexit, sir. I'm sorry.